Fox News alert. Justice Kennedy's final decision dealing a major blow to big labor. The Supreme Court ruling 5-4 that public employees cannot be forced to pay labor union fees if they don't want to. It was a major victory for our next guest, an Illinois state employee who says being forced to hand over a weekly portion of his paycheck is a violation of his constitutional rights. Joining us right now is the plaintiff in that case, Mark Janus, along with his attorney, Jacob Hubert. And they're joining, it looks like they're at the Lincoln Memorial, but actually they're in our bureau, where, as you can see here in the background, there's some drilling going on. Guys, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay. Morning. Mark, let's start with you. Why did you want to sue?
Well, there were so many aspects of the union that I just did not agree with when it came to their politics, and also when it came to their policy and some of the collective bargaining efforts that they were trying to accomplish.
Are you anti-union?
No, absolutely not. If people want to voluntarily join a union and they want to voluntarily pay the dues, I think that's absolutely good for that individual and that union. But why should I, as a condition of employment, be forced to pay a fee in order to just work in a public sector area?
Yeah, but Mark, that's the way they've been doing it for decades.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's right.
You're right about that. So, Jacob, what about this particular case do you think appealed to the Supreme Court with the 5-4 verdict, that they would say, you know what, we shouldn't have to force people to do something they don't want to do?
Well, they've started recognizing in a couple of other decisions over the past decade that this is a strange thing where this one kind of group can force people to give it money for political advocacy. There's no other group really except the government that can force people to give it money like that. And so this was a strange situation that's contrary to First Amendment values, and the court signaled in years past that it was ready to correct that, and then it finally took that step yesterday.
And Mark, this wasn't a political decision for you. It's really about your First Amendment rights, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the First Amendment is a contract with the people of the United States, and it says that I have the right of freedom of association. And unfortunately, with these agency fees and the way it was set up in Illinois and also many other states, there's 22 across the country, you know, we don't have that right. We're forced into this, whether we want to be or not. Nobody asked. The fee just started coming out of my paycheck, and nobody said anything about it other than, boom, it's there.
Sure. And one of the things is, for a lot of union members, the money goes from their paycheck into the coffers of the union, and then ultimately, Mark, they oftentimes support candidates it's money out of your pocket. You don't particularly line up behind them.
Well, that's correct. But also, we did try to get an accounting, and we tried to get some information, but, you know, it was so vague and so nebulous that it was hard to understand where my money was actually going. And that's one of the problems I had. If there was a good accounting of it, you know, it may have been a little bit better, but it just never occurred.
Sure. Jacob, final question. They are suggesting that perhaps some teachers' unions could lose up to a third of their members and a third of their money as well. Going forward, what's the immediate impact going to be for union members across the country?
It really depends on how workers choose to exercise their freedom. I think in some places, workers will probably like their union, and lots of them will join, and the unions won't lose much money. But maybe in other places where unions have taken the workers' money for granted and haven't been very responsive, people will opt out a lot. But we'll see. It just depends on the choices people make now that they're free to make them.
Mark, it's been a long fight. Worth it?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, there is approximately 5 million of us in 22 states,
right,
you know, across the country that this is going to affect. And it's just the fact that we want the choice to say yes as much as the choice to say no, and just kind of trying to make it a little more even and understandable that we do have a choice for workers. And this is for workers, and that's the bottom line here. And I also want to say that it's also only the public sector. This does not affect the private unions at all. Strictly public sector unions.
But as you did mention, it does impact 5 million coast to coast. Mark Janus and Jacob Hubert, we thank you very much for joining us from the D.C. Bureau, where suddenly it is quiet. Apparently somebody's on a coffee break. All right.
Evidently.
Thanks, guys.